Mr. Miller will begin with our final question, and we're going to go back and revisit jobs because I think jobs is probably something that we're all most interested in as a Chamber of Commerce. We create jobs. We provide long-lasting jobs, lifelong jobs in some cases. So, simply put, what would Congress do, or what can Congress do to foster job growth?
Congress can do some of the things that we're already doing. In the Recovery Act, we made a major investment on the advice of a cross-section of the preeminent scientists, Nobel Prize winners, in research and development. Also on the advice of the California high-tech and biotech community that said we have to invest in research and development. We've supported the extension of and the permanency of the research development tax credit, which is important to the fundamental growing of the American economy. But we also made a bet because the people in those industries said that after you do that, we said, where are the jobs going to come from? And they said 25 years ago, 30 years ago, we made a bet on telecommunications. And now if you're going to make a bet for this country that pays multiple dividends, you will make a bet on energy. You will make a bet on setting a price on carbon, and you will make a bet on alternatives and renewable energy sources for our nation. That came from a Republican chairman of the board of Intel. And he said, that's how you're going to create jobs here. But you also must do what Congress must do, is it must improve the education systems in this country. It must provide the resources for that. We need greater college completion, because what are we seeing in our colleges? And what are employers telling us? I meet with the California Roundtable, I meet with the Silicon Valley Business Group, I meet with these people all the time. The number one item on their agenda is education. And getting more people to go to graduate school in sciences and mathematics and engineering, to get more people to complete college that started. That's why I changed the rules of the loan program, so it would be less expensive for families and for students to borrow the money necessary so they can complete their education. We took away $62 billion that was going to banks to subsidize them to loan the government's money to these students, and we took that money and we gave it back to the parents and to the students who are trying to finance their education. And they're now paying lower interest rates, they're now paying lower transaction costs because that money is going to be given to them directly.
Thank you. Mr. Tubbs.
Jobs. More jobs. Two corrections, or two comments quickly. Former budget director for President Obama has come out against raising the taxes on anybody in America. Now I know why he's former. And the other stat that George put out was that there was a $5 trillion surplus in 2000 before George Bush became president. That was a projection, that wasn't money in the bank. That was a projection based on a bubble economy that we should know better. We never had a $5 trillion surplus in the bank. It was something maybe hoped for in the future. Right now we have $13 trillion of deficit, growing by over $2 million every minute of every day. And the regulations, the policies coming out of Washington, led by George Miller, are making that reality continue for as long as we can see. Many of you got that piece of paper showing the red of the future. There is a $1.2 trillion deficit in 2019. Are you going to still blame George Bush at that time when we're still $1.5 trillion in the hole? This has got to stop. Jobs. We have to give the people who create jobs in this country the best environment in the world to produce and create those jobs and keep them. We do that by killing the three-legged monster. I'll hit it again. We give them the certainty coming out of it. We need leadership in our government to get out of the way of the private sector. It is not government that is going to produce the jobs that grow our economy and get us out of these doldrums. It is the private sector. And as long as the government continues to put the burden on these businesses, it doesn't matter how much stimulus money we pass. It doesn't matter how much we incentivize the future. It's going to keep going worse. We've got to get out of the way and let private business do what they do best, and that's grow jobs, grow our economy. There's a lot of ways to do it. Please check my website, ricktubbsforcongress.com. We'll talk later. Thank you.
That concludes our question and answer period for this evening. We'll now finish with closing remarks from each of the candidates. 3 minutes each, beginning with Congressman Miller.
Thank you again for the Vacaville Chamber for supporting this forum and giving us a chance to air our views in front of the audience and the viewers that are watching. It's an honor for me to be here, and I'm delighted that my wife Cynthia has joined me and my sister Laura has joined me. This is about the economy, but let us understand something. I appreciate that they now want to attribute the whole $13 trillion to Barack Obama. But the fact of the matter is $11.5 trillion of that was sitting on his desk the day he walked into the Oval Office after being sworn in. Because of tax cuts. Because of tax cuts, and because after 9/11, George Bush told America to go shopping rather than get prepared for what was going to be a long, long war and contest against terrorism. So we put that on the credit card. We put almost $1 trillion on the credit card. And the fact of the matter is, if we're going to bring our house back in order, and we'll see what the Presidential Commission says after the election, but the fact of the matter is, we're going to have to deal with entitlements. We're going to have to deal with discretionary spending, and that's why once again we put in place pay-as-you-go. Now the Republicans laugh at it, but what was the first thing they repealed when they took over the Congress? They took over the Congress and they repealed pay-as-you-go because they knew they couldn't do the tax cuts if they were going to be held accountable for them. And now we see that economists on the left and the right, the chairman of the Fed, tell us if you go forward with those tax cuts for the richest people in this country, you're going to add close to $700 billion to the deficit. But you're not going to cure the deficit problems until you cure the jobs problem. That's why we've been trying to attack it on multiple fronts, from the Recovery Act to provide jobs to workers using the Recovery Act to join with local governments and businesses to sponsor those jobs, with tax cuts to small businesses, with allowing larger businesses to expense more of their income that they invest in capital goods. It's about pulling that together. Just last week, or about 10 days ago, the President signed my legislation that will allow 16,000 school teachers to be rehired in California. And before that, my legislation earlier than that allowed almost 25,000 teachers to be retained last year. Our children shouldn't lose a year of education or be in a classroom that's so crowded that they can't learn because of this downturn. So we thought it was important not only to create the jobs, but to improve the education of our children. And that's what we need to do. And now we're talking about building an infrastructure bank that will finally start to leverage the private sector. The United States, by the Society of Engineers and others, is $2 trillion behind on old infrastructure that needs work.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. All right, we'll conclude with Mr. Tutt's closing remarks.
Very good. Boy, there's a lot out there. And I'm going to address one issue, and then I'm going to put the choice before you into crystal clear measures. The first topic I want to bring up, because it's going to be an issue between now and the end of election. George Miller's referred to me time and again as the Tea Party Republican candidate. Like it's a bad thing for one. But two, the Tea Party people, sure, I talk to them, sure, they're concerned Americans, and that's what I am, a concerned American. But like I said, I'm a union member. So George, does that make me the Labor Republican candidate? I talk to federal employees and hear their concerns and want to be accountable to them. Does that make me the government worker Republican candidate? I talk to anybody in our district, Democrat, Republican, Independent. I will represent them as a whole. I will just not discount or disrespect anybody in our district. So if you're going to call me a name, George Miller, if that's the way this campaign is going to go, the appropriate name for me will be the People's Candidate for District 7, because I will represent and respect all of you as your congressman. Now back to the pay-as-you-go. This is the crystal clear difference between us. George Miller has been called the father of pay-as-you-go. And in the 1990s, when we had a balanced budget, that was a great idea. Good for the 20th century. This is the 21st century. $1.5 trillion in deficit. If you try to increase spending over here and only cut it the same over here, you still have $1.5 trillion in deficit. It's not good enough. in the 21st century. We need new ideas, fresh ideas. I read the 2011 budget put out by President Obama. Have you had a chance to read it yet, George? I've read it. There is increase after increase, 20%, 40%, 67%. More than once it says in here, the highest spending ever for this program. And no offsets. Pay-as-you-go is great for the 20th century, not for the 21st. We need bigger ideas. We need practical, common sense solutions. This is what our country needs for the future. The difference is crystal clear. I'm going to throw one more thing in for you. I grew up on welfare. I know what it's like to be at the bottom. Everything I've been saying today is in respect to that. I have lived the American dream, and that is what I want to pass to my children sitting here. The difference is crystal clear. More government, more spending, more debt as a solution to American problems, or practical common sense that gives the American dream of individual responsibility, opportunity, and success to everyone here in District 7 and America. Thank you very much.